So don't worry, I'm here alone right now because I'm trying out a new thing. I find it very, first of all, I got a hair in my mouth from trimming my hair today. I find it very awkward to give updates when I have a guest here, like on the screen. So I'm gonna start doing my updates before I bring the guest onto the screen. So don't worry, my sister's here. She's waiting in the background. So I just want to give a few updates before we get into today's topic. The first one is I want to say I will not be thanking patrons on the live streams anymore. That is something I find incredibly awkward, considering that the live streams now seem to be almost always with at least one guest, if not multiple guests. So what I'm going to do is thank patrons on scripted videos that I put out and also on the podcast. So I just want everyone to know I still appreciate your support. I just won't be thanking new people on the live streams for that reason. I'm very excited to announce, speaking of Patreon, that I have some Patreon exclusive content out now. I have a video that I made about why I will be leaving social media in the coming weeks. And just talking about some of my thoughts about the online left and some upcoming updates for the show. So please check that out. Being anti-capitalist, I hate putting stuff behind a paywall, so I will also link these videos in the Discord servers. So if you can't afford to be a patron, if you want to join the Discord community, you can get access to it there. And then the live streams are going to be a bit different. The live streams themselves will be the same, but I'm going to start pulling them down right after they air and cutting them up. So the main segment will be posted out to YouTube as a video, which should improve the replay experience because a lot of people, you know, you have to like skip over the intro video and all this stuff. Now they'll be edited, so they just start when they start and you won't have to worry about like when the video starts. And the after party segment will be posted to a private playlist on Patreon and Discord. So now if you're here for the live stream experience, you can have the full experience, and then afterwards that will be nice because then the after party can stay sort of more a community thing, and the main segment can be more of the thing that's out on YouTube. And hopefully when people are not seeing 3 and 4 hour videos posted out, it can help increase my views and get some of that information out there. And then the last thing I want to say is, please, if you are someone who also listens to the podcast, make sure to check for the podcast. I've heard from a friend that I think she got unsubscribed from the podcast or something. So I am still posting podcast exclusive episodes every other week. And the latest one was how to develop a sense of self, which I'm pretty proud of. So just make sure to check for pink spots in your podcast streaming app. And if you see 2 of them listed, look, there's probably one that is transferred over from Bitchy Shit Show. You can unsubscribe to that and just subscribe to the newer version. So those are all my updates, and it was so nice to say that without feeling like some poor person was sitting here feeling awkward while I was talking. So I'm really excited to announce that today I have my little sister. Let me bring her in. Hello. So this is my baby sister, Gina, aka Gina Bug. She said that was her most authentic name that she could put on the internet. Here today to talk about her experiences being a caregiver to her disabled husband as someone who is also disabled, someone who struggles with chronic physical as well as mental illness, someone who's a mother, and someone who's also working class, someone who has to work full-time to help support her family. She's been through a lot and is going through, currently is still going through a lot. And she wanted to come on today to share her experiences and share what she's learned through her journey so far. And I, of course, was so stoked to have my little baby on the show. So, hello, Gina. I can't hear you. I don't know if you're muted. Did I mute you? What did you do? Little sister's always doing something. I don't know. So I muted you, I unmuted you. Do you still have the link? Maybe try logging out and coming back in. Okay. Well, it's never a day on the internet if there isn't some kind of issue. Of course, her stuff was working fine before, and now it's not. So yes, to set the scene. I can hear you.
Yay!
Yay! All right. So also to set the scene, we're going to try to keep this somewhat concise because my poor sister is sitting in a car in 94-degree weather. I told her to blast the AC while the video was playing. And she just got done working a full shift of overtime. So we're going to try to keep this to about an hour and then do a quick after party. FYI to the children, they always want me to go longer. So Gina, why don't you tell us about what happened to your husband and kind of set the stage for what you want to talk about today?
Okay. So May 9th, 2019, my husband woke me up in the middle of the night. He slapped my chest and grabbed my shirt. And I'm like, what? And he was complaining about being dizzy. And that happens when he doesn't get enough sleep. So I told him, just go back to bed. And then when he woke up a couple hours later, he asked me to text his bosses and say that he couldn't make it into work. He wasn't feeling well, which is very out of the norm. We both agree that as grown-ups, you do your own call-outs. You don't have someone do it for you unless it's an emergency. So I ran to Walmart, grabbed him some ginger ale and some crackers, like the basic, I'm nauseous, don't feel good. And when he wasn't getting any better, I told him, all right, let's go to the hospital. Like, let's get you checked out. Something's wrong. And he said he felt like he was going to be sick. So I held him up and I was walking him to the bathroom. And do you remember those Juicy Juice cardboard juice boxes? And like when you crush them in the middle, how like they crumpled into that shape? It's exactly what he looked like. He just crumbled. He collapsed. I physically caught him. He went unconscious. His whole left side curled up. And then when he came to, he wasn't making any sense. He was talking, but all the words, they weren't real words. And then he made the motion that he was going to get sick. So I propped him up and I held him while he threw up. And then we called 911. At the time, Mom and Sonny had come to visit because 2 months before this happened, Sonny went through emergency quadruple bypass surgery. And he almost died, and he had never met Parker. So they were out on vacation so he could meet her. And 36 hours later, John had a stroke.
Wow.
So talk about that being the luckiest part of the event happening when it did. But so ambulance came and got him. I followed him we have a local like small emergency room down the street now. And when we got there, he kept getting sick. Every time they tried to lay him down, he got sick again. He said everything was spinning. His head was killing him. Everything felt off. So they brought in the computer with a neurologist on the screen. And, he's asking, have you been sick? Do you suffer from severe allergies? Have you had a flu or a cold lately? And it was all no. And he's like, well, here's the deal. You either have an undetected extreme ear infection that's knocking your system off, or you had a stroke.
Wow.
So, and that was really hard because I know you know John and like you've met him enough to like understand. Um, but I'll explain him more to your audience. He's before his stroke, he was a very loving, patient, funny guy. He was a wonderful multitasker. Um, you know, I always made the joke that he was my gay husband because he had a lot of feminine qualities where I typically have a lot of more what you would call masculine qualities. And, we had that balance. But he had never been scared of death. That was never something that freaked him out. That's always been like my huge fear.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always the big, strong, cool, collected guy. So fast forward back to the first part of the hospital, and he had a male nurse who was looking at him, and he's like, "Man, are you all right?" And John just started crying. He's like, "I don't know what's wrong with me, but something isn't right." So the guy sat there literally rubbing his feet, like telling him, "Hey, man, it's okay." And they cried together. So that was my first cue that something was catastrophically wrong because that's just not him. So that hospital's smaller, so they didn't have everything they needed to test him. So they transported us to Portsmouth, so a bigger hospital,
Mm-hmm.
and they started running the tests there. There was a lot of back and forth about what had happened because he didn't have an active brain bleed. And since he was so young, he kind of got looked over because he could make his fingers touch. There was some weakness, but no one was really like wanting to call the duck a duck because he was so young. So we went through a lot of testing. He got, the ultrasounds, echograms, MRIs, CAT scans, spinal tap, like every test. And then they finally brought in the PT, the lead PT and OT for the hospital. So physical therapist, occupational therapist. So she asked him what he did for a living. And he's like, at the time he was working for Guitar Center. And so she's the first person to like get to know him and asked, are you a musician? He's like, I'm a guitarist, I'm a drummer. I've been playing for, 15 to 20 years, depending on the instrument. So she goes, okay, well, put your fingers together for me then. So he was able, where's my hand, to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that was as fast as he could go. And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, obviously, there's a problem. If you've been picking guitar for that long, like, you should be okay. So then she tried getting him on his feet, which was really hard for him. It took like 10 minutes to get him out of the bed because everything just kept moving. And she tried getting him to stand on his tiptoes, and his left foot would just not go. So she started seeing the immediate deficits. And I'm like, I'm really concerned because this doctor wanted to get him out. He was talking, he was responding, he was able to do the basic touch test. And I looked at her, I go, there's something really wrong. Like, this isn't him. Like, as soon as we were in the hospital, he wanted the lights off. He didn't want the TV on. He didn't want to listen to music. He didn't want to FaceTime with the kids. Like, he just, nothing, just completely disconnected. And then his tone went flat. Everything came out like this. And I'm like, there's something like, it's not my husband. Like, there's something off. So that lady was a badass, and she put her foot down to the doctor, and she's like, I will go to your boss if I have to. If he was a single person, you would not be able to send him home. He can't make it up a flight of stairs. You're not allowing, he's restricted, couldn't go to the bathroom by himself. He had me, and if like I had to go run to be with the kids, he had to call a nurse to get help because he was a huge fall risk. So we I was able to stay with him the whole time. I was very lucky, and it was because Mom and Sonny were there. And my best friend in the whole wide world, she's the kids' godmom. She went and taught them their routine and stuff, and like made sure the kids were okay. And she was a sweetheart. She came to visit me every day in the hospital, and I got the, "Hey, did you eat today?" And I'm like, "Yes." And she goes, "Good, you're gonna fucking eat again." And she would just sit and like force me to eat with her, which was amazing because I dropped like 20 pounds while the first couple months of just being so stressed out. So he got a neurologist in there His name is Zach, and he's still his neurologist to this day. He's the most phenomenal human. Um, like, he always makes sure to make our appointment the last appointment of the day, and he makes sure that I'm there with him so we can discuss the real life. Because this is the thing I'm going to give everyone a warning on. First off, I didn't know anything about strokes. Okay, I thought I knew. Left side goes weird, right? That's like the face drop. I just thought it was mainly physical. But the reality of a stroke is it hits your brain and it causes an unknown, unexplainable, like, just, you have no idea where it's going to go, brain injury. You don't know what's going to get knocked. And so we, after all this hunting and grueling, and I did a lot of fighting and advocating, we have a team that doesn't just care about the medical aspect of the stroke, they care about the personal part of it as well. How does he do with the kids? How does he do with himself? How does he do in a marriage situation? It wasn't just about the clinical, you had a stroke, let's get you walking and talking. So he was in PT, OT, and speech almost immediately out of the hospital. We were in the hospital for 11 days. He came home with a cane. He couldn't open doors. He couldn't open up bottles. He couldn't stand in the shower. We had to get him a shower chair. We had to get like all new pillows, all new everything, all of his medications. They put him on a diet restriction, even though, like, we ended up finding out it didn't have anything to do with his diet. Oh, let me paint this. I forgot to say this. My husband is a 6'2" man. At the time of his stroke, he's 185 pounds. He was going to the gym 3 to 5 days a week, and he has never tried anything ever, like never tried alcohol or drugs or anything. Like, what, you epitomize as a really healthy person. So, after a lot of testing and retesting, cardiologists, pulmonologists, neurologists, PT, OT, speech, we found out what happened is he has a hole in his pulmonary shunt. So the vein system that goes to his heart has a hole. And then he also has a prolapse mitral valve on the inside of his heart. So the valve that's responsible for circulating the blood into oxygenated and unoxygenated regurgitates. So his blood wasn't filtering properly. So it pooled up at the top, clot, and the clot just happened to go. So the shittiest part about all of this is that it could happen again. The other extremely shitty part about it is that they will fix his heart eventually, but it's such a risky surgery that they want to wait until it gets worse. So, because they have to, like, just imagine it. You know what I mean? Like, inside your heart. Like, they're going to have to take everything out and then there's high risk of stroke during the procedure. He'll be high risk for stroke 3 months after the procedure. So they're trying to, like, elongate it because it's so risky. I understand why they want to wait. But that's the long-term shittiness of the situation. We got robbed. This is like my anger of it, is that we got robbed so young in our marriage. We're 31. Like, with little kids, you don't expect this to be the conversation. At 31, I became his proxy. We had to go through all those shitty questions. Do you want a DNR? What about life support? What about this? We had to have those super hard conversations. And that's what makes me so angry, is we're living an older life very young. And then what makes me angry for him, he died. The person who John was died on the 9th. When his brain got hit, he's not the same guy anymore. I'm still insanely in love with him. But everything's brand new. We're relearning each other while also growing at the same time. So we're facing like the basic struggles of just being, cohabitating with people. But then on top of it, we're adding, it's like a new person into the mix. So that's
With
super
all of those
confusing.
like responsibilities,
Right.
like, oh, this is a new person who you have children with, right? And like
Right.
live with. And yeah, and I mean, he's facing like trying to recover, also figuring out who he is while being a dad and a husband.
Right.
I mean,
And
that's intense.
well, that's, and that's a huge thing that helps me at the same time is anytime I get mad with him, I just play it in my head.
Mm,
I'm like, okay, like he's an idiot, but he had a stroke and it's not his fault. Like I'll get mad and then I'll start saying it in my head and I'm like, he's not an idiot. Like he had a
yeah.
stroke. He can't help it. He has brain injury. And I'm like, okay, like get back into peace with it. And it's like his short term is so bad that he'll have to put a chip clip on his shirt to remind himself he's cooking.
Mm,
Like he's been on medication for 2 years now. Same time every day. Still to this day, if you interrupt him on the way for him to get his medicine, he'll like space out on it. So it's that in itself is a lot of problem. And it's a problem for him because some people, when they have strokes, now don't misunderstand me because it's going to sound awful, but some people are lucky enough when they have a stroke that it's severe enough that they don't remember the prior them.
mm.
People with brain injury in general. John is stuck in a cage where he remembers who he used to be and cannot obtain it. So he's constantly fighting with himself over that. So that's a big thing we worked on. And a huge thing that his team gave to us, the sweet woman Joanne, to give grace. Give grace to yourself, give grace to each other, and just understand that we're in something that no one knows is what's going to happen. Like they've said that his brain hasn't officially settled into what it's going to settle into yet because
Mm.
everything's still developing. And then lovely old COVID came and we had to pull the kids out of school and we had to pull him out of therapy
Oh my
because
God.
he's high risk. So all of a sudden now the kids are home full time. He's not going to therapy and I'm working crazy because for 15 months we had a fight for his disability. So
Mm-hmm.
for 15 months, solo income. And then, oh, this makes me so mad. Solo income, kids and all that, but I was making too much money. So we weren't
Yep.
getting help. And I'm like, what? Like, tell me where the money is because I don't see it. Like, even now, I'm having to work crazy overtime because the state said that they were going to help us because we finally were vaccinated fully. So we want to put the kids back in school because they're suffering as well.
Mm-hmm.
John's not getting his break during the day because they're home. So put them in school because it's not a want. Everyone needs that. I need that so I can work. John needs that so his brain can start functioning better because he's regressed so much during this whole thing. And then the kids need it because they're kids. Like Parker's falling behind because she's not like her brothers. Like she doesn't just pick up the educational stuff. She's like me. It's
Mm-hmm.
she can get it, but she has to work really hard for it. And then on top of it, she's in speech and OT because her ears were all messed up. She had to get ear tubes because she was completely like she got double ear infections all the time. So we got her ear tube. She started hearing better. But then we started noticing that she kept like holding food and water in her mouth all the time. And I thought she was just being silly. So we took her back to the ENT for a follow up. And I was talking to him about like, he asked if she was snoring. I'm like, well, yeah, a little bit. And he goes, does she ever just hold food in her mouth? And I'm like, what a weird thing to ask. I'm like, yeah, she does it all the time. And he goes, it's because her tonsils are so big she can't swallow. I'm
Oh
like,
my God. Poor
oh,
baby.
I'm like, oh, and talk about feeling like a shit parent. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I was like, oh my God. So we got her tonsils and adenoids out New Year's Eve. So less than a year after her tubes. So she's in speech because that just messed her up. She wasn't a good communicator. Kids didn't want to play with her because they didn't understand her. So we're dealing with that. And then Ray is just like his auntie.
Yep.
And he's very, very smart. And he's very sensory overload. And he has an awful time managing his feelings. There's a lot of unexplained meltdowns
Mm.
where something as simple as, hey, do you want your dinner right now? And he just flips out. And it's like, okay, like we'll just work through it. So anyway, that whole long story is because the school that they go to is attached to this therapy. So they just walk over and pick the kids up from class, bring them to therapy, and then bring them back. So that's another thing that we can take off our list, right? We don't have to worry about
Hmm.
getting to and from appointments. Their appointments aren't at the same time. So I take that off the plate. So when we got this all set up, our car decided to shit the bed. The engine gave 6,500 bucks to fix the engine. Girl, I don't have it. So we tried trading the car, and our credit wasn't good enough to get into a new car.
Hmm.
So I had to go out and get a $2,000 loan to put down on an old used car. So I picked up another car payment, another insurance payment, and then on top of it, another loan payment. Um, but at least we have a car that runs now. It's safe for them. But so when I started filing everything with the state, I was under the impression they'd be able to help me more.
Mm.
So they help with $67 a kid a week, which sounds great,
No, it doesn't.
except for
It
it's,
sounds terrible.
yeah, it is horrible because it's 428 bucks a week after they've helped to get the kids there. And I found this out 2 weeks after they were in. So they've acclimated. They're back to, learning. Parker's doing so much better already with her writing and everything. And John's like, we can't do it. We can't afford it. I go, we can't take them out. It's not
Hmm.
an option at this point. Like, we kept them out of school for 16 months. We homeschooled them. Like, it's not an option anymore. They're having their friends again and this and that. I'm like, we just have to get through the summer. So, lucky enough, I work for Walmart now, and I have proven to do a good job. So they are offering me overtime. They let me come in whenever I want. I don't have to ask permission anymore. They just trust that I'm going to do what needs to get done, which to me is huge. Very validating for me to finally work for a company that's like, we trust you. I'm like, oh, okay.
I like imagine that, right?
Right. Like, I'm like, wow, this is not what I expected. So, anyway, my life is a shit show. Um, I'm behind on rent, which is really scary. And even I worked almost 140 hours in 2 weeks, and the paycheck is still not enough to get us caught up. So it's a lot of stress because we got his disability, but his disability isn't even enough to cover rent. Like, it's like $400 off from paying rent. So, and then getting the kids in school, there was a $741 deposit. And then we had to pay for the first week and the second week. So they took like 1,600 bucks out first go. So I'm really lucky to have an apartment manager that like knows us, knows our situation. She's very good to us. She's very good to the kids. And she knows that I'm late, but she knows that I'm working my butt off to get her the money. But it doesn't change that being one of the biggest stressors is for 2 years, I haven't been able to financially breathe.
Hmm.
There was a couple months. One of those is because you're the best ever. Um, but it just sucks because I started building my business. I do the
Yeah.
resin and the jewelry, and it made me so happy. I have my own little workshop, this and that, and I thought, this is it. I'm finally going to get to just work part time and just start focusing on that. And then the universe just giggled at me and said, maybe not. So that's
Yeah.
where we're at.
Yeah. It ugh, it breaks my heart, and it's like I did an episode a really long time ago called The High Cost of Being Poor. And I feel like this is almost a follow up to that, because in it we talked about like how being poor is just this fucking endless trap where people think you're like coasting, like, oh, you get disability or you get whatever. But it's like, if you actually look at what's happening, it's just this endless series of debts and late payments and interest rates and not actually getting any kind of substantial help. Like the fact that John's disability doesn't cover what he would need to live doesn't make any sense.
Right.
He's disabled, he can't work, so why should he not be receiving enough money to cover what it would take for him to survive? But it doesn't. And now look at your family, and you have your own struggles, and yet your entire focus, and you've always just wanted to be a mom. Like, for as long as I can remember, you just have always wanted to be a mom. Like, you're the type of person who loves being with their kids, loves being home. And for almost the entire time that you've been a mom, you've just had to be out of the house and working
Yeah.
constantly. To the point where, like with Parker, you were having to breastfeed her on your lunch break from
Right.
work, or like on your breaks from work. You'd have to run home from a shift and like breastfeed her and like run back. And and it's also the stereotype that people have that poor people are lazy. And that has always been so painful to me, because I feel like our family in particular, like none of us are lazy.
No.
Dad, who knows? That's a fucking that's a
Sorry.
whole thing.
Uh,
Like I'm tempted to call him lazy because he's a fucking asshole, but like if I'm being my compassionate self, like he also has struggled with a lot of like health issues, as long as he was our dad. He's
right.
had really bad allergies. I kind of wonder if he's autistic, because he seems to have a lot of sensory stuff. So I don't know, maybe, who knows, but like he always, struggled with like being allergic to chemicals, scents, and all of these things. Mom always struggled as well, but we were always like, our parents were entrepreneurs. They worked, they had a business.
Right.
You and I have always hustled. I mean, even Angie, like she's always hustled. Like we've always been a family of people who work really fucking hard. And it just is so unfair that that's the perception of people who are financially struggling, is that we're lazy and that we
Right.
don't try. And I mean, to be honest as well, like I think who fucking cares if someone's lazy? Like that doesn't mean that they should starve to death,
Right.
Like I very much believe that. But it's just also like when you have hustled so hard and worked yourself into chronic illness and mental illness, and you still can't make ends meet, and the bills are still piling up, and you're having to take out loans and stuff, and then you see that the public perception is that you must be either lazy and or irresponsible. And
Right.
like I can't imagine anyone more responsible than you. Like you somehow are holding this household together, and you always have, like you've always been such a good mom, like such a dedicated mom, such a dedicated wife, such a good worker. Like you're like the hardest worker ever. And yeah, and then that's what the narrative is out there, is that like people who need public assistance are fucking lazy and irresponsible, and we're just like a drain on
Right.
society.
Well, and the thing that really pisses me off about the whole thing is because it actually happened with Angie. I know she's like a topic, but
I mean, it's fine.
she got so mad at me
Angie's
because
our middle sister, by the way, who I'm estranged from, and Gina is
kind of
sometimes sometimes in touch.
sometimes I contact incautiousness, but
I like that.
When this all went down and she found out mom was staying, because mom stayed with us from May to October. She sent Sunny back and stayed
Mm,
with us to try to help, which
yeah.
you can imagine how that went. Um,
Yeah.
that's that's how the kids ended up in school in the first place, was because she couldn't handle that and John, and I can't blame her. You know what I mean? It was a
Yeah.
lot, especially for her, and she has her physical and her own mental disabilities that restrain her from a lot of things. And I think this was before we figured out she was borderline personality.
Even though I told you she got diagnosed with that when I was in high school, but it's fine.
You know what I mean? We
Yeah.
both know. We both know. We know.
It's the endless re-diagnosis that we have to go through. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I
Yeah.
digress. But with Angie, she got really mad at me for not asking her
For no
to,
reason.
to
What?
move in with us to help us. She's like, I can't believe you'd use mom. I'm like, what? And she goes, me and Mike were willing to, uproot because her and her husband both work remotely. And she goes, I would have done that. I'm like, you do realize how insane of an ask that is. I would
Yeah.
never in my life imagine asking someone else to uproot their whole life for me. Like, that is so insanely selfish. And that's just not how I work. And there was a punishment for that. So I sent her a picture of the kids going to their first day of school, and she ripped my ass for it. I bet that's expensive. And I go, well, it is, but I'm getting help from the state. Oh, of course you are. People like you always know how to use the system. I'm like, what? What?
You know,
I'm like, dude, first off, they have
she
every
better
single
hope she and I
paycheck.
are never in the same room again together because.
Oh, girl, like, I was so mad. I'm like, well, if you want to get into it, first off, I pay into the system because I'm a taxpayer, so thanks for that. And second
Right.
off, they have every scrap of detail. And like, I talked to her recently where she's like, I didn't realize how bad the situation was. I'm like, he he had a stroke. Like, he didn't have a cold. Like, he had,
Right.
but I okay.
Like
And
it's like
then
a life altering event.
right, and then she was like, well, what? You should just you're not gonna believe it. She's like, you should just teach him something for him to be able to bring an income.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God, why didn't I think of that? Oh,
I know.
thank you.
You're a genius. That's the
Oh,
other thing I can't fucking stand with both like chronic illness and like financial insecurity is people think they're like, hello. And they always say the most obvious thing, and you're like, do you really think so little of me that you don't think that I would have thought of that on my own? Like, I wouldn't be doing that if that was possible.
I'll never forget that happened with Parker when she was like 6 months old. Every time I went to lay her down, she made this weird cry. It wasn't her cry. Okay, Mama Bear. I know
Yeah.
my baby's talk. So I brought her to the hospital, and this doctor looked at me and she goes, did you try soothing her before you came in? I'm like, nope. She cried once and I just showed right up. Like,
Oh my
what?
God.
Like, are you really like? And anyway, she didn't have a fever, and they're like, oh, we don't know. So they looked in her ears, and they're like, oh my God, she has a double massive ear infection. I'm like,
Hmm.
hmm.
Oh, so something was wrong with my child and
Oh,
I
got
picked
it.
up on it? Okay,
Right.
cool.
Like, hey, she's not, because we were still breastfeeding at the time. I'm like, my boobies aren't soothing her. There's something wrong. Like, the boobies were the answer for every upset
As
for
they
her.
often are in life,
Well, they
let's
well
be
they still
real.
are. Let's be real. Parker and Raylan are obsessed with my boobs still, and I blame it on the nursing. They
Yeah.
both nursed till they were almost a year old, and I blame it on that. And they giggle and they go, "You have boobies," and then they run away, and it's like ridiculous. It's funny, but it's like it's okay when we're home, but sometimes
Yeah.
they do it in public, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, don't do that, please. Like, you're getting too old for the booby giggle game. That's my life. It's
Yeah.
boobies and
Glamorous.
kids. And so everybody should be jealous. But I try to have a
Oh
sense of
my
humor about it.
God.
My
I mean,
favorite
what else
thing,
can you do?
right? Well, John's got the same dark humor about it where, like, the first time I had to leave him at an appointment by himself, he had to go to the dentist. And I was
Mm.
like, oh, and I had to go pick up the kids from school, and I'm like, ah, and I'm like, just call me if you need anything. And the nurse looked at me really weird, and he goes, oh, she's worried about my stroke brain. And the nurse was like, what? And it's like our favorite thing to do to people. It's so mean, but it's so funny for us where he's like, stroke brain. And people are like, what? But so then we explain to her, I'm like, he had a stroke and like, this is my first time leaving him. And she's like, give me your number. I'll call you if anything's up, like going on. I'm like, thank you. Um, and then, oh, big warning for this. Let's have a real moment. And I'm sorry if I get emotional, but if I can give this piece of advice for anybody being a caregiver, never make a promise that's going to hurt you mentally.
Mm.
So, like I said before, John was never scared to death. But when we were in the second hospital, it was nighttime and he was refusing to sleep. I'm like, honey, you got to get sleep. You got to get some rest. And he started crying and I'm like, what's wrong? And he's like, I'm scared if I close my eyes, I won't wake up again. So, and this is where I'm giving the advice, I made the stupid promise that I would watch over him and make sure he was okay. I didn't sleep for months
Mm.
after he came home because every move, every weird breath, cough, moan, groan, anything had me up and worried because now we have this thing looming over our heads. He can have another one. You
Yeah.
know, obviously he's on blood thinners and everything to help accommodate for that, but this was a freak stroke in the first place. It was against all odds that it would happen. So, not to say it'll happen again. So, I will give that advice because I had no fucking clue what I was doing in the beginning of this, as I wouldn't expect anyone in this situation. Do not make any kind of promise that's going to screw you up mentally because mentally that screwed me up bad. I
Yeah.
promised to watch him and protect him. And at the time, I just meant while we were there, right? I can watch the machine and make sure you're okay. I can press a button if something happens. Like, obviously, the nurse's station is, checking in on him. But I didn't expect it to affect me going home. And that's exactly what it did. And it followed me home and it screwed me up. Also, don't let people judge you on shit. Like, you got to do what's right for you and your situation. Like, I'm part of a stroke caregiver group. And there are people on there that's like, you know what? I'm really sorry, but I cannot do this anymore. I cannot take care of my person anymore. Because some people get real aggressive after brain injury. Some people
Mm-hmm.
get really violent. And there's no judgment to that. You got to do
Yeah.
what you got to do. And the thing I hate the most is no one wants to talk about the gross, nitty gritty specifics of the heaviness of this situation, right? No one wants to sit and talk about, hey, John lost a shitload of our 23 years worth of memory. Like, he started calling Keegan his stepson after
Mm.
his stroke. And we both know Keegan has always just been his son.
Yeah.
Like, all these
Oh,
big,
that's heartbreaking.
it's awful. It's absolutely
Ugh.
awful. And, he forgot stuff from our wedding. He forgot stuff when we were kids. He's forgotten books that we used to read every night to the kids. All these things that, you
That make a
feel
life, right? That help
right.
you feel connected to the people you have to be connected to.
Right. And so for him,
That's
there's no
devastating.
emotional attachment to it because he doesn't know to miss it because he doesn't have a link, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for him, the hard part is watching me react to it.
Yeah.
Like, you ever heard of a Caregiver orange?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love them. Okay,
They're great.
so when I was pregnant with Raylan and Parker, both times, he got pregnancy cravings. He was that guy. He would
So
like
cute.
text me when I was at work. Can you get a chocolate shake and fries from McDonald's? I'm like, who's pregnant? Like,
Right.
who? So one of the things he loved was Care oranges because when I was pregnant with Ray, I worked at Trader Joe's. So I used to bring home Care oranges for him. And Walmart had them one day, and I'm like, babe, they have Care oranges. And he was like, okay. I'm like, oh no. Like, it's gone. It's just gone. And he looked at me, he goes, I can tell that this is obviously a problem. And I'm like, it's all right. It's okay, because I don't want to make him feel bad because it's not
Yeah.
his fault. So it's really complicated in that. So what frustrates me with people is they don't want to talk about that, right? It's uncomfortable.
Hmm.
But for some reason, people feel emboldened to ask, and I fucking hate this question. Have you ever thought of not being with him?
Hmm.
Okay, so you don't want to talk about the relationship, but you want to talk about me leaving it?
Yeah,
Like,
because then they don't have to feel bad about what you're going through, because then you won't be going through it, right?
right. And I'm like, what?
Takes
I'm like,
care of the issue.
so one time I got really mad at someone because I didn't like the judgment because they were very judgy about the whole situation.
Yeah.
And they're married, right? And they're like, well, if it were me or my wife, if we didn't push each other harder, first off, he accused me of not pushing John enough. And I'm like, hmm, hmm, okay, I'll take it. And then proceeded that if it was him or his wife, if the other one didn't give enough effort, they would leave each other. I'm like,
Wow.
okay, you've never been through this. You don't understand brain injury. You have no empathy to it. So I just straight up looked at him and I go, you know what? I am so sorry for you that your love and your relationship is so fucking weak and fragile that you wouldn't make it through this.
Yeah.
Like, this is my chance. If I didn't want to be with my husband, I wouldn't be with him. But I want to be with him. And it's on his side too. All of a sudden, he's a sensory overload dude who can't drive in traffic. He can't order through a drive through. He can't order on the phone. He can't have two people talking to him at the same time. He doesn't remember shit. I can't tell you how many cups of coffee got left in the coffee, like the Keurig, because he just spaced. You know,
Hmm.
all this stuff are like, I'll look at him and he's like, I forgot to do something. I'm like, it's okay. Like, we got it. So for someone to just be like, you can leave him, I'm like, no. But I offered to John multiple times, if this is too much for you, we can figure out how for you to get your own apartment or
Yeah.
like you to move in with your parents. Like, if you just need some time away from us while you're healing, we can do that. If we're too much for you now, as much as that breaks my heart, you have the freedom to do that. And that's the other thing about caregiving is it's not just about the person you're caregiving about, and it's not just about you. There's got to be a dance and a fluctuation, because I sucked at it in the beginning. Like, I told you, like, I just recently finally got insurance again, and I called my doctor and I'm like, I need help. I need help. I'm like fucking lost in the sauce. I'm depressed. Like, I wasn't suicidal, but I felt so much unworthiness.
Um,
And it was because I wasn't producing serotonin because, well, of course, I know why. My situation, I've been like this for
yeah.
2 years. There's no space for happiness in that. So they put me back on Zoloft, and that rocked my system in the beginning. I was really sick for a couple weeks, but I noticed I was all of a sudden I could sleep. All of a sudden I could stay asleep. All of a sudden I was giggling. I was on the floor more. Since I've been on Zoloft, the use of my phone has gone down 48%.
Wow.
Like, I'm just involved
Hmm.
and I'm happy and I'm laughing again. And, John keeps telling me that I'm more playful again. So it's not just him that got fucked up. I got fucked up and we got messed up together and separately. And, he doesn't remember what my favorite food is. He doesn't remember what my favorite candy is. And to me, as long as he can still make me laugh, and when I see him, I get that little bubbly, gurgly feeling on the inside. And, when he gives me a kiss, I'm like, ooh, like, he still brings everything I fell in love with is still there. It's just different.
Mm.
And getting through the difference is the hard part. There's a lot of hard, awful conversations that neither one of us want to have. It's brutal to talk to him. Like, he has this insane overprotection of the kids now. Like, stupidly insane. Like, don't run in the muddy grass with your shoes because you're going to ruin your shoes. I'm like,
Mm.
babe, like, they're going to grow out of him in 2 months. Just let them be kids. He has a hard time letting them be kids because, and this is the worst part, is he realized that he can't protect them from everything.
Yeah.
Having a
Yeah.
stroke made him realize that imagine how powerless, like, I feel powerless in this situation, but imagine how literally powerless he must feel. And
Absolutely.
he always tries to play it off like he's cool with it. He gets it. He understands it. He always tells me, babe, you can't worry about it all the time. I'm like,
You're like,
okay, when I figure out how to do that, I'll do that. It's like that stupid anxiety meme. Like, I told I told one of my friends that I'm anxious, and they said, "Oh, just don't be." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks for fixing it." Like, just
yeah,
that.
all better now.
Oh, you want me to not worry about it? Got it. Cool. Awesome. We're good
Again, why
now.
didn't I think of that? It's so
Right.
obvious.
Right. And so bless him, but it's just like the weirdest stuff bothers him. Like, I have to ask him if I can hug him because his skin got really sensitive after. He can't stand being in the ocean because it hurts his skin. Like, that extreme coldness
Wow.
hurts him. Like, just so different. And like, it took him a long time. He's finally writing music again, which is like a gigantic deal because he lost it from his left side being so weak. So there's definitely progress, but it's like he doesn't understand how to borrow when you do simple subtraction.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he doesn't understand the concept of carrying over. So math was never his strong suit in the first place, but it's certainly not there now. So it's just rough. It's just really rough because he's still really monotone. Um, he sounds like an ass a lot. Like, he knows that. He sounds like, I'll ask him like 6 times a day, like, "You all right?" And he's like, "Yeah, why?" And I'm like, "Because you sound unhappy." Like, I'll call him on the phone and he's like, "Hey, like, is this a
Mm.
bad time?" And he's like, "No, I'm just sitting drinking coffee." And I'm like, "Okay, so we're good." Like, we're all right. So
That's hard.
it's super hard. And it's hard for him because he has
Yeah.
no idea. He has no idea how to put it together. It knocked his empathy and his sympathy and his tone. It knocked him being able to like register if we're looking at each other having a conversation. Like, those physical social cues, he doesn't have them. And he's like really ironic with stuff. Like, Raylan will want to tell him a story, but he already knows what Raylan's trying to tell him about. So he'll like tell Raylan, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, you got to let him finish talking. And he goes, but I already know. And I go, right. And who else does that? Who else over explains things all the time? And he's like, you? I'm like, no. Like, he's literally spent an hour and a half telling me about like 30 minutes of gameplay of Call of Duty with his friends.
He's basically autistic now.
Basically.
That's like all like autistic traits.
Right. And raised just like him without having had a stroke. So,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
also, because I've asked his therapist, Raylan's therapist, I'm like, can we like check to see if he's Asperger's? Because I'm convinced. And she's like, well, I'm used to seeing more extreme forms. I'm like, oh, I understand that, but he can't wear jeans. He can't have tags. His food can't touch. Everything has to be just so, or it's all hell breaks loose. Like, and I'm not talking about fits. I got kids. I know what a fit is. I'm talking about full-blown meltdowns where he screams,
Mm-hmm.
he claws at himself, he bruises himself all the time. I'm like, you gotta stop hurting yourself. Like, you want to be mad? Be mad. Mad is fine. Hurting yourself and being mean, not okay. Like, so it's hard because I'm doing it with them at the same time.
Yeah.
Because John slips in and out of where his brain is. Sometimes it's like arguing with another kid. He's really defiant like a teenager now. Like, I can see him, like, he turns red when he starts getting overdone. And I'm like, why don't you go take a break in the room? He goes, you don't tell me what to do. Okay.
Is he
I
like,
can,
I hate you?
yeah.
Slam the door.
Oh, he's done it. He's literally
Jesus.
stomped off, slammed the door, and I went into the room and he's on the bed like this. And I'm like,
You're like,
he's
really?
like, he's like, well, you sent me off to my room. And I'm like, are you, I'm like, I can't even with you right now. And he's like, what? I'm like, you get the luxury of going into a quiet room by yourself and doing whatever the hell you want for however long you want. Don't be throwing a fit. You ground me anytime you want if this is my deal. Like, enough. And he's struggles with his ego now,
Yeah.
which was just never a thing. And he's like very stereotypical manly now. Like, I hate to use such a broad term, but just like what you would expect as a
Hmm.
stereotype when thinking of him. And that was so hard because I'm like, I miss my feminine aspect of my partner. Um, and then also, I got really mad at myself after his stroke because I realized how much I let myself depend on him, which I have never let myself depend on someone as much as him. Like, even to the point I didn't know how to put the car seats back together. Like, we were cleaning the car seats out the night before he had a stroke, and they were apart in pieces, and I cried for like 30 minutes because I couldn't get them together. And then he was trying to help me. Like, this was after we got back from the hospital. He's trying to help me, and his hand's not working, and he's upset and frustrated. And I'm like, how could I ever let myself get into a situation that if he had not made it, I would have no clue what to fucking do right now? And that's been my biggest struggle, is letting him back in, because now all my walls are up because I realized that I made myself unhealthily labeling myself as a weak person for giving my heart to someone, which in reality, I should have celebrated it. What a beautiful thing that someone
Yeah.
coming from our past let someone in
Right?
enough. And instead, I'm like, yeah, idiot, this is exactly why you're not supposed to let people in. And then I heard the great voice of, you only can depend on yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Hmm.
So that was really tough. And then, it's really tough for him because he feels like a failure a lot because I'm working so much. But then he's,
Which was already kind of like a sore point in your relationship, and now it must just be,
yeah, really grinded in there. So, yeah,
yeah.
so I've always been the breadwinner, which is okay. Like, I was bred for it. And, it's been me working 80 hours a week pretty much since he's had a stroke. And, you know, it's tough because sometimes he gets really angry. Again, no emotional regulation, and he gets accusatory sometimes of how I want to be at work more than I want to be home. And I'm like, okay, well, we both know that's not right. Like, we both know I just want to be here.
Yeah.
But lately he's gotten better about it. Um, like, he'll randomly send me a text message saying that he's really proud of me.
Hmm.
And then he's finally admitted. I go, babe, if we were in a reverse role, you'd be doing the same thing. He goes, Gina, I could never work the way you work. He goes, I'm just not capable of it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, thank you.
I
Like,
think
I,
that's true.
I think it's true too,
I
but
mean,
like,
I think most people couldn't work the way you work. Like, yeah.
right. But, and the way I see it is because, like, here now I've got, because I used to work at Walmart when we first moved back here. So I
Hmm.
know a lot of people here already. So they all know us and they love us, and everybody is nosy at the time clock. Oh, you leaving already? And I'm like, I'm going on my second lunch. And they're like, oh, well, how long have you been here? And I'm like, like, one night I got here at 10 o'clock at night, and I stayed till like 1 o'clock the next day. And they're
Hmm.
like, you can't overdo it. And I'm like, I don't think you understand. Like, this isn't like me wanting a tattoo, so I'm working like crazy, which I wish I could get one, or my hair done. You know what I mean?
Same.
Like, it's
Same.
not fun. It's because I have to. And people tend to ask a lot, like, well, how do you do it? And I go, here's the thing, asking how I can do it is a luxury I don't have. There is no
Yeah.
other option. We don't have anybody who can help us. We're financially stripped, like, mom's tried to help us. Like, she'll give me $50 once in a while to like just help me like pad through the week, which is amazing. I always tell her, don't send me anything if it's going to put you out, because I don't want to put you out either. So, oh, the other thing was we had food stamps for a little while, and then they took it away and didn't tell me. So we went from having $600 for groceries to nothing, and no one gave me the heads up. So like that's coming back into the budget. So it's just so frustrating because it's not an option. The what motivates me to keep me going is my kids need their education. My husband needs his breaks. We need to pay for these cars. We need to live in our house. They need clothes on their back and food in their bellies. And if I have to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I will find a way to do it because there's no other option. There's no backup plan. If there was another option, I would have already done it.
Mm-hmm.
I would have already gone down that avenue. And so I understand people say it with love, like, hey, don't burn yourself out. And it's like, you have no idea. Like,
Yeah.
if I did a 64-hour week, I could have done a whole nother shift. But they won't let me work 7 days in a row. Like, I will grind as hard as I have to grind to make it happen. Because it has to happen. Because if I don't do it, there's no one else to fall back on. So I just want to give props to anybody who has to go through that situation because it fucking sucks. It's endless. It's suffocating at times. And I always say it's like juggling.
Mm-hmm.
I have all these balls up in the air and not an answer for a single one of them.
Ugh, girl.
And so I know you're not a big silvers linings person. See,
No.
I listen to your podcast.
I know.
But I am that person. I am that
I know you
obnoxious
are.
person. Because
And
it works.
I love that for you.
Yeah,
Just
well,
not for me.
it works for me. But that's the difference. It works for me. Is if I'm like, hey, silver lining is I can go in at 10 o'clock at night and my children won't miss me because they're sleeping and they're in school for the rest of my shift. So like by the time I'm eating my second lunch, they're eating their breakfast. So at least there's that. They don't have that ache of
Yeah.
seeing me leave out the door like they did when I worked at Outback. And, so I'm like, there's my silver lining. I get to come in the middle of the night and just die on the other side of the day.
Woohoo.
Woo! And also, they let me work in the freezer, which has been great for my fibro. I have fibromyalgia. I didn't put that out there. So it's like getting a giant ice pack on my whole body. And then I go to the floor to put the stuff out, and then I warm up. And then I go back in the freezer. So all day it's like a hot, cold pack day. And it's the first job I've worked in 6 years where I don't leave limping.
That's really good. Yeah.
So there's that. And it's instantly gratifying because I take boxes out of a bin. I fill holes on the floor. And then when I come back, there's all these holes in the boxes. I'm like, yes! Like, you get to see the cardboard stack up. And for some reason, that mentally is just like really peaceful and hopeful.
Yeah.
So, in recap, when you're a caregiver, it's okay to be mad. I wouldn't be mad with the person you're caring for. I would find a safe place to vent that out. Because I promise you, when you are a caregiver and you let it out on the person you're taking care of, you feel like a piece of shit after. Because you hear yourself talk it out to them. And that's really hard. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't times to have stern conversations or real conversations or be able to go, hey, you're making me mad right now and I can't do this with you. Because, like, I have another friend, she got into a nasty car accident. She had a really bad brain injury and it changed her. Mm-hmm. And we were discussing, like, it's very common in brain injury that you can't have immediate conversation. So with John, I'll say something to him, but I got to give him a few days to like mull it over. Our best form of communication is journals and texting because it gives him time to work it out. And like we've literally texted each other from opposite rooms to like have a conversation. And does that suck? Absolutely. Do I miss being able to have like on-time conversation with him? Yes. But you got to make sacrifices in that and making sure that the person you're taking care of has the best way to communicate. Because if you try to push them to communicate in a way that they're not capable of, you're just going to hurt them. and you're going to
Yeah.
make them feel bad. And I'm not saying that your needs don't need to be met, but everything does need to be heavily assessed and understood. Does it suck to not have a conversation live? Yes. But does that hurt me? No, it doesn't.
Mhm.
Does it hurt him? Yes.
Mhm.
So the like that assessment is, hey, communicate the way that works for him because he has more time to really think about what he's going to say, because he gets really defensive and short because it burns him out, and then he just gets mad, and it's like he says things that he doesn't mean, and then he has to like try to remember that. And also, people with brain injury, when they're overstimulated in an emotional sense, the memory gets corrupted, so they won't
Mm.
remember what
Yeah.
happened, but they'll remember how they felt, and that will change the dynamic of the conversation. So that's happened with me and John before, where he got really mad in the conversation, really upset, which, granted, you know what I mean? Like, he was entitled to have those feelings, but it twisted what I was trying to say to him. Because I was trying to
Mhm.
explain to him that it's okay, and like him being newer is okay, and him going through this is okay. And, we're so lucky he's alive, and we just got to work on these things. Like, he's really strict on the kids, he's really rough on the kids. And he's like, well, fine, then I'm just an asshole then. I'm like, whoa, that's not what we're talking about right now. But he remembered feeling that. So
Yeah.
that corrupted the whole conversation. He remembers that as that happening. And like, I'll talk to him.
Apparently it's party time. All right. Well, let me mute myself. I don't know what is going on over there.
But so it's just that whole, you have to assess. Of course, there needs to be healthy boundaries. I'm not saying for anybody to just take copious amounts of crap if they're a
Mhm.
caregiver. Like, that's not at all what I'm saying. That's not healthy either. But you have to be able to step away and look at it and go, okay, if I were this person, how would I handle that? Or, does this hurt me? Does this affect me negatively? Is this just a nuisance? If it's just a nuisance, you got to get over it. Like, he can't handle grocery shopping even before COVID. The lights, the
Yeah.
sounds, the people. He can't
Yeah.
remember what the fuck he's getting. Oh my God, our Walmart redid the Walmart on the inside. Like, they remodded everything. I had to leave work to pick him up because he was crying because he had no idea what was
Aw,
happening. So,
that's
stuff
so
like that.
sad.
Do I want to go grocery shopping every time?
No.
Hell no. But does it hurt me? No. It's just stupid. I usually listen to music, but like, and the other thing, it on the opposite side of that is, I struggled a lot with making it okay to feel how I felt too, in that
Yeah.
extreme of, I'm a very anxious person. I'm high anxiety. I hate crowds. Um, I'm dyslexic. And for a long time, I thought I was losing my hearing because I have a hard time hearing people. So I went and got that tested, and it's actually, with my dyslexia, something flipped in my brain where I can't isolate noise.
I struggle with that too, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
everything comes in at once. There's no filtering.
Yeah.
So when I'm in
Does
a
it make
loud,
you angry? I get like, well, I get nauseous and sometimes I get extremely angry. Like,
uh,
there's certain bars here I can't go to because the way they're built, the sound, like all of the sound in the restaurant comes at you at the same time, and it'll make me feel like I'm gonna pass out.
it makes me anxious.
It makes me angry.
Yeah, it makes me feel like shutting down. Like when I'm at work
Hmm.
and I'm on the floor, they let us have an earbud in, and I have to have it in so I have that one thing to focus on,
Yeah.
because otherwise I'm just overwhelmed
Yeah.
and everything seems to get brighter. And I was like,
I
well, is there
always have
anything?
earbuds in all the time
It's
because it
awful,
just helps,
right?
like, yeah, focus.
And so I struggled with that for a long time of, hey, like John used to drive everywhere. He
Mm.
was comfortable driving. I don't like driving, but now I'm the full-time driver. And like the first time I had to pick Keegan up from Logan, I'm like, driving into Boston. I'm like, fuck.
Oh
Like,
my God.
I don't
Ugh.
ever do it. John was always the one to pick him up.
And Logan Airport is literally, I can say this because I've traveled a lot for work, the worst airport on the face of the planet. It's
Oh,
so bad.
it's so bad. And then on top of
It's the
it,
only
since
airport that I'll like actively get lost in and be like, literally, where the fuck am I and how do I get out of here?
no idea. Anytime I go, no idea. And since Keegan, my oldest son, sorry, I keep assuming you guys all know about my life, but you don't. I have an oldest son. He's 10 and he lives in California with my ex-husband for the school year.
Who's a fucking bastard.
Oh, God. That's a whole nother podcast for a
Yeah.
whole nother time.
Yeah.
When to get out? The
Yeah.
answer is before you pee on the stick. Anyway, so
Girl.
sorry.
Well, and that's also another great class-oriented story of like what money can do, right?
Right. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what
Anyway.
happened. Anyway, so Keegan likes to fly alone because they pamper the shit out of him, you know?
Mm-hmm.
He gets free blankies and pins. He gets to go into the cockpit, meet the pilot. Like, it's Keegan. He's got charm. So the shitty part about picking him up from the airport is you have to park. Then you have to go in
Ugh.
and you have to get a ticket to go pick him up and wait. And
I'm
then,
getting like secondary stress. Like I'm getting
yeah.
like sweaty thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm doing this Thursday, by the way. Woohoo!
Oh,
So,
I'm
but the
sorry,
worst part
sister.
is when he goes back, since he's underage, you have to bring him in at least 2 hours early, and then you have to sit with him, stay with him, and you have to sit and wait there till the airplane is in flight, like off the runway.
Wow.
So, on top of having to drive into Boston, which sucks, and going to the airport, which sucks, you have to pay for the parking, which is ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. But anyway,
How much is that? It must be like $1 million.
I think the last time I went, and this, keep in mind, I haven't seen Keegan. By the time I pick him up, it'll have been 522 days since I've seen him because of COVID.
Wow,
Yeah.
dude.
Well, he's living with his grandparents right now, and they're all high risk. So now that
Yeah.
there's the vaccine, we're all vaccinated. So anyway, so it's been a long time. So the last time I went, I want to say it cost me like $42. So I can't imagine what it's going to cost now.
Yeah.
Probably a lot.
Yeah.
But I'm so excited to see him, and he wants to dye his hair blue. And I'm like, okay, I'm excited. I'm
That's fun.
excited. And he's curious about girl clothes, which I find to be so fascinating. But he hasn't told his family out there. And I'm like, honey, you gotta. Like, you can't live your secrets. Like, you're 10. You can't live full of secrets. Because they know about the makeup. And, like, obviously I talked to his dad about him dyeing his hair. I'm not that parent that's like, I'll do whatever I want. He's my kid. There's a lot of communication. I just haven't told him about the clothes because I don't feel like that's mine to tell. I think that's definitely, that's Keegan's deal. But I have no judgment for it. I still dress in boy clothes. And it's funny, Chris tries to blame me for Keegan being so feminine. Like, you were married to me. Like, we shared the same shoes and sweatshirts and shirts. Like,
Yep.
I'm not your girl. Like, I'm not your girly girl. I'm very masculine.
Queer.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I'm going to be completely honest with you. If anything ever happened to John or me and John didn't like last for the long run, for sure I can see myself being in a relationship with a woman after this. Like, usually I don't have a preference, but this time I'm like, for sure, I'm just going to not because it's so much drama. But
wait, I thought girls were the dramatic ones. What do you mean?
I know. Oh my God, I'm so dramatic.
That's what when people are like, women are so emotional. I'm like, have you dated a man? Men are so fucking emotional. It's ridiculous.
It's awful. And then they tell you, well, you need to get in touch with your feelings. So you do that, and then they're like, whoa, this is too much for me. I'm like, no, you asked for this. You will deal with it.
This is your fault.
You did this to me. It's like the best phrase of any relationship. You did this to me. It's inevitable. It will happen at some time. Like when
Yeah.
I was when I was pregnant with Raylan, I wanted orange soda and a Big Mac, and I have never been so angry at John in my life. I'm like, you. I'm like, this is your baby. I'm like, I hate orange soda and Big Macs, and he goes, it's okay. I'm like, it's not okay.
It's not okay.
I was like, don't you come home without it. I was so mad because I hate orange soda. I still to this day
Yeah,
hate
that's
it.
pretty gross.
But man, I was so mad. I was like, ugh, like this is taking a sip. I'm like, bleh. I'm like, this is your, bleh, it's your baby.
Oh my god, I love that.
And it's true. Raylan is a little mini me John, like to the
Yep.
T. They fight the same way. I laugh a lot when the two go at it.
Oh,
And
I can only imagine.
I'm like, you do realize you guys are fighting about literally the same thing. On the same wavelength too, by the way. Like Raylan has like learned how to pick up drumming and piano playing just by sound.
Mm.
So he's very repetitive in what he likes to listen to. Like he'll listen to 20 seconds at a time and make you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it till it's like
Mm.
locked in. And John gets annoyed with that. And I go, you did this to him. Like you used to do this when he was itty bitty. Like you imprinted this on him that this is the way you build music, and he's very musically inclined. Like Kingdom Hearts, you familiar?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Okay,
girl, when you were in diapers, I was playing Kingdom Hearts, okay?
it ain't that old, sis.
Okay. Okay.
So he's obsessed with Kingdom Hearts. That's his game. That was his first like big video game ever. He beat it by himself. I'm like super proud of him.
Wow.
Kingdom Hearts 3. I'm like, wow, I'm like super, super impressed. But the opening song, he figured out how to play that on piano by sound
That's amazing.
by the time he was 4. Like,
Wow.
that's just how his brain functions. So anyway, so John will get annoyed that he wants to listen to the same thing over and over again. And I'm like, this is literally how you learned how to play music. Like, when you got a drum kit, you literally had headphones and you would listen to it until you got the drum part down. Like, you're literally upset about you.
Yes.
Like, this is literally you. You groomed him into this kind of perception. This is how you taught him. This is how you feel music. And he's like, well, and I'm like, nope. Like, I just leave him alone. Just let him listen to it. And I go, you have your own, because Raylan has a pair of headphones for when things get too loud. So I got John a pair. John refuses to wear them. He's like, well, it's not my choice. I'm like, I don't care. Just try it. And that's what I mean. Like, John was never that stubborn. He is so stubborn. I'm like, if I tell you you can't have your headphones, will you put them on? Like, what do I do to put these stupid things on your head because they're 4 and 6 and they want to listen to stupid music like Miente 50 times because it was in the Trolls movie and it was cool. So they want to listen to it on a loop, and that's okay because that's what kids do. And he's like, no, I can't handle it. My brain can't handle it. I'm like, then go to the room. And he's like, but I don't want to be away from you guys. I'm like, oh my God. So that's my life.
You're
I'm
like, figure it the fuck out, dude.
oh, it's so rough because sometimes I look at it, I'm like, really? Like, okay, so this is funny, but this is how numb and dumb he can be about stuff now. Like, he's just knocked. So our wedding anniversary is coming up in August for 6 years. And I found this hot sauce company he's obsessed with, and High Desert Hot Sauce Company. Really cool. Like, I'm letting you know because this guy, he is segue, recovering addict that got into making hot sauce as part of his recovery. So he makes small batches, and his stuff is so good. He has a tiki masala one that's insane. Anyway,
I love that.
so he had a sale because he was redoing his labels. So I bought John one of every flavor, right? I'm like, let's just do it. That was a Christmas gift. I'm like, let's just do it. So then he just ran out of the green one. And I'm like, ooh, well, our anniversary's coming up. Maybe I'll buy some more hot sauce. And he's like, but that's not a good us gift. I'm like, what? And he's like, because I'm the hot sauce guy. That's not a good us gift. I'm like, okay. I'm like, let's talk this out, honey. It's our anniversary, right? And he's like, yes. And I go, and other people can buy us gifts together, right? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, okay, my job is to gift you specifically because I married you. And your job is to gift me specifically because you married me. And he just went, oh, like he just,
Mm,
that basic concept is just,
yeah.
so I guess if that wraps it up for you about where he's at mentally, he didn't understand that his wife could buy him a gift for our wedding anniversary. I'm like, why would we buy a gift for us? Like that doesn't make any sense. But he's a good guy. I love him.
Yeah. Well, and he's been through a lot. Like,
Yeah,
and I just think I'm glad you talked about how it's both of you choosing each other and your family and working through that, because I think there's so many layers here, right? Like you could feel that you have to stay because he needs help, and he could feel that he has to stay because he needs help, or
right.
feeling like guilty about leaving the family or whatever. So, something I talk a lot about is how people who are disadvantaged, I guess we'll say, in some way are often infantilized. Like people make us out to be like children, and, that happens to disabled people all the time. And so I just really like that you talked about like the fact that you two are talking about this stuff and you're making conscious decisions and life choices for yourself. And like, even though he is so high need right now, he still is like choosing to be in his life, and he's choosing what that looks like. And I think that's really important because I think especially when you get into brain stuff in any kind of way, but really any disability, I think people just assume that the disabled person just has a caretaker who just makes all the decisions for them. And it's really important that we remember that no matter how disabled someone is, like they should still always have an active role in their own life and in making decisions about their own life.
Absolutely. And another thing is letting the person you're caring for make their rules.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
because I helicoptered and like umbrellaed a lot in the beginning over him. I was very, very protective for obvious reasons. Um, and I went with him to all of his therapies. And then one day he was in a very like defiant, stubborn attitude of he felt like that made him inferior.
Mm.
So he challenged me about how he could do it his damn self and go to the appointment by himself. And I said, okay, I'll wait in the car. That's fine. Like, I'll go get a coffee or something. I'll be back. He got in the car and I'm like, so how did it go? Like, legitimately, maybe I am, overbearing. Like, I get it. I can be extremely overbearing, especially when I love someone.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, never leave me again. Like, it was just like that sad. And like, when he first got out of the hospital, he used to grab my shirt like this all the time when he was overwhelmed. He can't go into Trader Joe's or Market Basket. It's way too much for him. That's always a shutdown. Anything that's busy is too much for him. Any extreme weather is too much for him. And like, it breaks my heart because he gets all these big ideas and then I have to kind of reel him in from it and like
Mm.
talk it out. So he makes the choice whether, because it's up to him if it's worth it or not, right?
Yeah.
Like, I love that you talk about spoons. I love spoons. I hope to
Mm-hmm.
one day get my tattoo of my bouquet of spoons. I love spoons. So, does he have the spoons for it? Like, is it worth it for you to overspend on that day? If it is, let's do it. Like, I will do anything you want in the world if we can get you there, right? So, he wanted to go to a Ghost concert. It's like his
Mm.
favorite band, and it was the last band we saw before his stroke. And I'm like, okay. I go, but let's talk it out. It's going to be really loud.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of people, and they're going to be touching you. It's going to be unavoidable. There's going to be strobing lights, loud music, and it's going to be like a 3-hour show. I go, with now you thinking about that information, what do you think? And he sat and he thought about it. He goes, you're right. He goes, especially because the drive down was going to be long too, because it was
Yeah.
in Boston. I'm like, so you got to weigh it out. And how many days after that are you going to be knocked down? How tired are you going to be with your brain? At what point of the show are you going to stop enjoying it and it's going to become a problem? I go, but if you want to do it, let's do it. Like I would love to go do that with you. So the only thing so far that's like really made him feel normal in the outside world of the home is getting tattooed.
Mm.
For some reason that works for him. Obviously that's not a therapy I can give him. He's also picked up painting is a big deal. He all of a sudden became this beautiful painter. That wasn't a thing before. And I'm like, of course you'd
You're
pick
like,
that
of
up.
course, you just be more creative and amazing.
Right. I'm like, all the time he'll color a picture. And I'm like, I hate you. Like, you're such an asshole. And he's like, what? I just, like, the first time he tried watercolors, he's like, I think, I don't know. I don't know if I like it. And I looked at it and I'm like, I'm like, of course. I just kind of threw it together. I'm like, whatever. I'm like, I could try my whole life and never even get close to that. I look like a preschooler coloring. But I make jewelry, so joke's on him.
And he's like, I support you, I don't care. And you're like, well, I still showed you, so there.
Yep.
Um,
You got to be
yeah,
competitive sometimes.
you do. You're
I don't
like,
know
come on.
where I don't know where I got that from.
Yeah, you're always the sporty one.
Hmm.
I feel you always had that like side. I feel like I also have like an athletic side, but it's more like the leader slash like team play. Like I'm very much like a team player, which you are as well, but you're also competitive and you've always had that like that side to you.
It makes me
Um,
tough when I get into a new job. Makes it a little tough.
yeah.
Apparently, I come off a little aggressive. I don't mean to.
Coming in hot.
I don't. I
Watch
don't mean
out.
to. Sorry, it's not my intention. Most people like me after some time, though. So got that going.
You're like, just give it a little while. You'll get used to it. What was I gonna say? Well, I really like you talking about that because I feel like your process with John and what you and he both have to go through when he has an idea about something because I've come to realize that that's basically my own process with myself as well. But it took a really long time to figure out that that's what I needed to do because I had so many scripts in my head for how productive I should be able to be and what I should be able to do. And when I would suffer the repercussions of something like I also really enjoy live music, but it's very challenging, right?
Right.
It's a very taxing event. I love travel, but that's incredibly like taxing and I pay a massive toll for that. So when I would suffer those consequences, I hate calling them that, but you know, we'll just put it that way. I would just blame myself. And I would be like, you're so weak. Like, what is your problem? Why are you so tired from this? This is something that other people go and do all the time and like have no issues. And eventually I just had to be like, well, that may be true, but this is what's true for you. You
Right.
know, like you can be as mad about it as you want to be, but it's still going to be your lived experience. So maybe
Right.
instead of putting all that energy into being mad, you just put that energy into dealing with the reality of your situation and being more intentional about the choices you're making and being like I've learned I have to be my own caregiver and I have to look at myself through that lens. And that was really hard for me because I didn't want to be someone who needed care, you
Right.
know?
Well, look at the way we were raised. We were meant to not,
Oh,
which
yeah.
was hugely eye-opening for me with how I felt about the whole experience. And here I am giving him everything, telling him whatever you need, I'm here for it,
Hmm.
while telling myself, you idiot, how
Yeah,
dare
like,
you?
why do you
Like,
have any needs?
right. And so, and that's when it comes back to that lady saying, give yourself grace, give him grace, give each other grace. And it's so true is don't be comparative. And that's
Hmm.
what, and don't get me wrong, I'm not like all of a sudden this guru that gets it, but it's stuff that I intentionally work on all the time is my experience is mine, and it doesn't mean that I'm weaker or stronger or anything. My experience is my experience. Your experience is yours. And to try to sit and scale them
Yeah.
is just asinine, and it needs to stop. I could go running, and the way I feel after running can be different than your experience. But we both ran, right?
Yeah.
So it's not fair to compare them. And I just don't understand why there is that part of my competitiveness I've tried letting go of is it's not who's worse or worse off. You know what I mean? Like I've got a
Yeah.
coworker, her husband caught COVID and he's been fighting for his life for 3 weeks in the hospital now. And they still don't know if he's going to make it. That sucks. But she never looks at me and goes, well, what you're going through is nothing compared to what I'm going through. She still makes the time to ask me about it. And I make
Yeah.
time to ask about her. And like, it's just one of those like really mind opening moments of you can't compare your trauma in a measurement against someone else's and vice versa. Everybody goes through trauma and the way they feel is no less. There's no reason to ever objectify someone for feeling away. Oh, that's what you're worried about? Well, I have this. Way to invalidate everyone.
Yeah.
Shut up. You're all going through trauma. Come into it together. Just because someone's trauma is different does not mean it affects them less.
Yeah.
And so that was like a really big slap in the face. Because when I worked for Outback, it was like some bullshit, nasty drama restaurant life. And
I know.
by the time I left, I was assistant kitchen manager. So I would do clopens. So open to
Ugh.
closes, awful. And then open to close, open to close. And, you know, there was no real management in there. So everybody got to talk whatever way they wanted to talk. I'd be like, hey, can you guys just please bring the vent hoods down for me and I'll clean them and put them back up? I'm not fucking doing that. I'm like, what? And it was okay. It was accepted. And so I got into that, like, I fed into that nastiness because it was my
Mm-hmm.
life. And I just remember, like, a kid was complaining about being tired. And I go, well, you don't even have fucking kids. It's your own damn fault. And I'm like, who was that? Like,
Yeah.
who talks like that? And so it's just, you got to remember, you got to be able to self check yourself a lot and have people in your life that can kind of help you do it. And that's, I know, can be really hard and sometimes impossible to achieve. Like, I should definitely be in counseling, but I don't have time for that right now. And that's the legitimate truth is I don't have time to put aside for that. And if I do, the sacrifices my time with my kids. And that seems more depressing to me than just kind of getting through how I'm getting through right now. So don't judge people with brain injury. Understand that it's invisible. Understand you can't see it. And invalidating someone with a brain injury is so devastating because I've
Yeah.
seen people do it to John over and over again, including his own family, you know, because they love him. They're just very different from how we were raised. And, you know, like I warned everybody before the first time they saw him out of the hospital, hey, he doesn't like being touched. And he got hugged for literally 7.5 minutes.
Oh,
And I'm
God.
like, mm. And they, you know, they think I'm overreacting and that I'm being too sensitive because John doesn't want to tell him how bad it is. So he never tells them how bad it is. So I look like this crazy, overbearing person. I'm like, why don't you just talk to him? He goes, because I don't want my family to worry. I'm like, but they're your family. Like, they're there to worry. And that's just not how his family is. They all do that in their own way of trying to protect one another because
Mm-hmm.
they respect the fact that everybody has their own shit and they don't want to add on to it. And I'm like, but no, your family, like, you're supposed to share your shit so you can all carry it together so it's not
Yeah.
so heavy. So everything just feels really heavy. And I'm not bubbly all the time, but I'm more bubbly now because work sucks. So I fixed that. My mental health sucks. So I'm working on that. I'm tired and I don't think that's ever going to go away.
Mm.
But, I have to keep thinking that one day it'll all be worth it. Because if I think it's going to stay like this forever, I'm just going to
Yep. Fucking
lose
lose
it.
it.
Yep.
Yep.
And so I'm really hopeful that my money situation is caught up if I keep working brutal hours, and that I can keep paying a ridiculous amount for childcare because that's what everyone needs. And I hope that this was helpful for anybody listening. If I helped at least one person understand, hey, you're not alone and it sucks, or hey, be nice to that person, I'll feel like this was a huge success. Because I know I'm really talkative, but I'm really private. So this was really, really out of my norm.
Yeah. Well, I
But
appreciate it. I'm quite honored to have you here on my platform, regardless, because you're my sister and I love you.
no, I love you too.
Um, but especially to talk about, yeah, something so personal. And I think something so important because I really do feel like your experience is at the intersection of so many things that, it's like capitalist values that we have because those feed into like ableism and classism. There's just this real lived experience of your life that
Right.
just highlights so many things that are faults of the system but are put like promoted as faults of the individual. And just like I think, I don't know, just to me, again, you're just such a good example of like, I don't think that you should have to work a lot to be valued, but you're just such a good example of someone who works so fucking much and like tries so hard. And so none of this is a fault of like you not working your ass off. It just shows that the system is completely fucked up, you
Right.
know? Yeah, because even before this happened, it was still a struggle financially. And that's something I carry. Like, I carry a lot of guilt that I can't help you, or I can't help you like in some kind of substantial way. And that makes me feel like shit because I'm the older sister. And I know that we both have like the brains to be financially successful, right? Like we both
Right.
have the intellectual ability to have been in some sort of job where we could be making really good money, but our lives didn't go that way for different reasons. And for me, like I carry a lot of guilt because I was basically there in my career, but then my body gave out and I just couldn't do it anymore. And that's really hard. Like it's something I struggle with all the time, is knowing I could probably be making six figures somewhere and just sending you money, but like I physically can't do it. Like it's hard for me to even get up on time to like have a phone call with my accountant or something,
Right.
like yeah, it's like become the more I like continue this journey of being unemployed and trying to figure my shit out, the more I'm just like, wow, I am really fucking disabled right now. Like
Yeah.
it's just like I think my body's just finally been like, sorry, dude. Like cause like you were saying it, I really resonate with that. Like I always was able to do it because I had to do it.
Right.
And then I hit this point where it's like, well, I don't have to do it anymore. And my body just collapsed. And now I can't go back to it.
Right.
So
Which
anyway,
is which is
oh, go ahead.
shitty, but it's good. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
glad that you're there, and I don't ever want you to hold that kind of responsibility on yourself.
Well, I'm
Of
going to,
don't get me
but
wrong.
I
If you
will.
could send us copious amounts of money, that'd be great. But
Right.
I would never want or expect that, and I never ever in my mind has it ever crossed me in that situation. You had to take care of us so young. Like the shit you had to do was more than anyone should have ever asked you. You don't owe me shit.
I know I
It's
don't owe
not.
you,
I know, but
but
it's
you're
like
my
it's.
baby.
I know, and I love that I'm your baby, and I always want to be your baby. But I just don't. I don't know how to
I
say it
know.
the right way. But you know what I mean. Like I just
I
don't
know
want you
you
to
mean.
hold on to that because
And I'm
that's.
working on it. I'm
It's
working
not
on it.
your burden to carry. But I love that you you have that you love me that much, but that's not yours to carry.
Well, and I think it's a good conversation too about like generational wealth or like generational poverty, I guess we'll say, because like our parents didn't have a relationship with their parents and didn't get really anything passed down. I guess mom did a bit, but like not really. Like
Not
grandpa didn't
really.
have, I don't even like calling him that. Rex didn't have that fucking, don't even get me started. Um, didn't really have any assets. And then our parents were like disabled, really, when you look at it. And they didn't have any assets. And now we don't have any assets. And your kids don't have any assets. And it's like this endless,
Right.
thing of where and I feel like I think that's why it's like hard for me to let that go, because I was always the one in the family that was like supposed to be something big in like a capitalist sense,
Right.
like I was supposed to be the one who got some like really high paying job and be very like professionally successful, and I know that I could have, but then I couldn't.
Right.
And that's really hard. It's hard to think like I could have been the one to help pull us all out of this and like start a new pattern, and I couldn't
Yeah, but look what
do
you're
it.
doing. But look what you're doing in a non-capitalist way.
Yeah.
The work you're doing now is far more important than a six-figure.
I mean, I agree with
But it still
you,
sucks. I get that
but
it
it
sucks.
sucks. Yeah,
Yeah, it
like
totally sucks.
it's that's what I grapple with all the time is like I think that's at the heart of it too, is like if I wasn't so anti-capitalist and so radical, then I probably would have been able, because part of my burnout too was like doing this work on the side the whole time while also working this more than a full-time job.
Right.
And yeah, I just think about that a lot. Like if I could have just been a normie, right, who's like fine with status quo, and maybe you would have thought of me as like your snobby big sister, which I know you do sometimes anyway. That's fine. But like I could have been like your older sister who maybe like doesn't get it, but I could have been someone like who could support you and make your life easier. And it's one of those things, like I don't regret who I am. I like who I am a lot, and I've worked hard to like who I am, but it's hard to think that there's this, it's almost like a different like timelines or something. I just think there's a timeline somewhere where there's a Nick who's like CEO or something, or COO somewhere making a shit ton of money, and Gina's like okay,
Yeah.
financially. Like it's hard. But yeah, it's a struggle, because I feel the work that I do is really important to me, and I think it's really important to some other people, and that is all that really matters. But then we live in this capitalist world where like if I had money and I could give it to you and to myself, like we would be much better off.
Right.
Even stuff like if I could pay someone to come clean my house, if I could hire out my laundry, if I could do things like that, like I would have such a better quality of life, because those are things I struggle. It's like, do I do a podcast episode today, or do I do my dishes? Like
Right.
that's a lot of what my days come down to, and it's really fucking hard to live that way, because
It is. It is.
yeah,
It
you
really
know
is.
what it's like.
And like John's like that, where he'll get upset because he feels like he has to get the housework done because he doesn't work. And like I'm like, who cares? I'm like, who
Yeah.
cares? And he's like,
Yeah.
I didn't do the dishes today, and he'll be super upset with himself. And I'm like, did the
I
kids
feel
get?
that.
I'm like, did the kids get fed? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, did you keep
Okay.
the house from burning down? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, then you did great today. Like,
Yeah.
you kept
It's
two
hard,
humans.
man.
I'm like, you kept two humans alive. Like, I am so proud of you. There's a wasp in my car. Here we go. Sorry.
Well, I called an ambulance for you. They'll be here. I don't know if you can hear that.
Ambulance.
Oh, ambulance. Oh my god.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
and
will
it's
always be your dorky little sister. I just want you to be rest assured that I will always have awful humor.
I have never worried about that. So we've had a lot of good comments, mostly people just expressing like sympathy and stuff. But Koch Potato said there's a timeline where you're like Angelica's mom in Rugrats. And I thought you would appreciate that because Rugrats was such a big part of our childhood experience.
It was. What terrible parents they all were, though.
I know.
Oh, and then when you figure out that Tommy Pickles was a preemie baby, which is why his mom is so crazy about him, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. That's terrible.
Yeah.
That's just awful. Just awful.
I've been meaning to go back and rewatch that show because I hear it holds up pretty well.
It does, and so does Rocco's Modern Life.
Oh,
if we could just recap to that one episode where they're going against the city, and they had the song, "You can't fight City Hall, you can't fight corporate America because they are big and we are small. You can't fight City Hall." I'm like, well, dude, did they not nail it or what? I'm like, no wonder like grown-ups love this show.
The 90s were just peak kids television. Like, every fucking show in the 90s was like the best. Like it was weird and had like cool messages, and I just think it was honestly the peak of children's television. Like every fucking show.
I know. Some of the shows the kids watch now, I'm like, ugh.
I know. Awful. I see some of this stuff and I'm like, what is this? Like, even Salute Your Shorts and stuff. Like, do you remember that? I think about it all the time. Pete and Pete. Like, what a weird fucking show that was.
They put his organ in a jar for surgery. What was his appendix?
Something.
Or Alex Mack, the girl who was covered in radioactive goo.
Yes.
And who was Clarissa Explains It All. She had a baby crocodile.
Alligator. Crocodile.
Whatever.
Elvis, right?
Yes. Anyway. And then her friend would climb through the window. Crazy. But I will say, out of all the cartoons that are out now, I hate Caillou. Fuck Caillou. Anybody who has kids.
Those are some big words.
Anybody that follows you that has kids or have seen this show, I can almost guarantee you will agree. Caillou is terrible.
Well, I'll have to take your word for it. I only watch the ones that get like She-Ra. Like, you know, like not the really kid ones, but like the ones that like everyone thinks are great. All right, anyway, this would be amazing after party content.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm new.
Yes, it's quite all right. Actually, we could probably just go into the after party because you can't go anywhere. Usually I do the outro thing so people can have like a potty break and stuff. So I'll just open up the floor. If anyone wants to ask my sister questions or has any comments, please ask them now. So I don't know if you know, but I call myself the mom here, and these are the kids. So the kids have been very funny. So one of the jokes is like I talk about how old I am, and I always say I'm like this ancient creature that's been around for like millennia. Anyway, so Koch said, I'm sorry, Nick, you call yourself a dinosaur and your granddad is called Rex. Yes, I never even thought about that, but it's true. His actual name is Rex.
And I have little T-Rex arms.
I have like T-Rex shoulders. Have we ever talked about this? My shoulders, they're so like not there. And I don't think they look... I mean, they obviously don't look like big shoulders, but it's more when I wear stuff, the straps fall off of me all the time. Like, my shoulders are never big enough for anything. So I have, like, T-Rex shoulders.
I have little T-Rex arms, and I blame it on the boobies. But, like, I'll go to try to reach something, and I get cut off because...
That struggle is so real. And your tits are bigger than mine, which I don't even know how that's possible.
Oh, they suck.
I don't know how you do it.
I just want them to take them.
Same.
Take them.
No, I keep joking with them.
Take that.
Oh my God. Take it all.
Just take it.
I joke with them all the time that once I finally get enough followers, I'm going to do a huge, take my boobies fundraiser and finally get these things cut off because I fucking over it. Although I'm terrified of getting a breast surgery because it's so intense.
It's very intense.
Yeah. But I've like watched videos of them doing it and I'm like, oh my God.
Oh yeah, you can't watch it. I made the mistake of watching a C-section before my second one.
It's
Bad idea.
wild to me how much surgery is so mechanical. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
It's like working on a car or something, and you think, but this is my body. This is my squishy, like soft, and it's like one of the breast reduction surgeries I watched. It's like the guy got up on the table over her and was just like smashing, and I was like, he might as well be working on like construction, like
Ugh.
you think like, oh, it's surgery, it's going to be all precise and like, all these things, and then
No,
you're like, no, it's so mechanical. It's
it's
just
so mechanical and so
yeah.
routine. And
Yes.
John was crazy. He watched the C-sections.
Oh,
And
no.
like he had his head around the tarp,
Absolutely not.
and they're like, "Oh, do you need us to move it for you?" He's like, "No, I'm just seeing what you're doing." Only took his head away when they were taking the babies out because he didn't think it was fair to see them first. I'm like, it doesn't freak you out that you're watching them cut into your wife? He goes, it's beautiful. You're giving birth. I'm like, God bless you, but no,
Yeah.
I don't want to see it. Keep the tarp up. Thank you.
No.
Like,
If I was there, I would have been on the floor. I would have been that person that they're like, you need to leave because we can't attend to you and her. I'd be like, fair.
It's awful. They strap you to the table like this because it's just rough. And I'm like, I love my babies. This is awful. Because I'm allergic to the medicine, but there's no other medicine they can give you for the surgery. So I'm going to throw up. But you're paralyzed from your fucking lungs down. So you're literally just going, It's the funniest thing ever. I laughed through all of my two of my C-sections. Keegan was an emergency. That was not funny.
No, that was not funny.
That was not funny.
No.
But worth it.
That's the thing,
Have
man.
you seen
like,
him?
Our family makes the cutest babies, but has the worst pregnancies. It's like this weird paradox where it's like we're not built to have kids, but then like our kids are the cutest.
Little
kids.
button noses.
I know.
Cheeky.
They're so cute. Yeah, everything up here, people are making comments, but a lot of it was just like, wow, this is heartbreaking, or like commenting on like social assistance and just how ridiculous it is that disability doesn't cover more and is so hard to get. We experienced that with our mom when she first moved out to California. She ended up going on disability eventually, but it took like forever. And I remember her telling me that like she found out that they're basically told to like deny everyone the first time, just out of pocket, so that like a lot of people get just like don't come back and reapply, so that they give it to less people. So ridiculous.
It's disgusting.
Everett said, related but not, doctors can be massive assholes, lol. Yeah. Koch said, in another alternate timeline, Nick, you have quarterback shoulders. That would be the best timeline.
Can we just match that up with Angelica's mother?
Yes. Well, because I would wear the big blazers all the time, right?
And you'd walk like this.
Girl, this is one of the reasons I love blazers so much, because they have the shoulders built in, and then I feel more confident. Like, oh, I could keep some straps up now.
I feel confident when my hair's done.
Ugh, same. Yeah, I've had to learn how to do this because otherwise I would be in a deep dysphoric depression right now. I just saw a friend of mine just got their hair cut and it looks amazing, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't wait to have a professional actually do this again. And like, because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, keep it short, shave the sides, that's working for now. But I'm like, oh, I could have someone do like a fade and do all this stuff in the back, and like that'll be amazing. Can't wait.
Well, if it counts for anything, it looks profesh done. You look really good.
Thank you. But this is what I have to do, because anything else, even when I just trimmed it, it looked terrible. It was so bad. It looked like someone took a lawnmower to my head. Like, I don't know what I did wrong. Anyway.
I have to be careful when I do home cuts because sometimes I get too close
Mm-hmm.
to the line and all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden there's like an indent.
Yeah.
I'm like, ugh.
Same.
I'm like, that's the long hair though.
I've struggled with this a lot because I'm like it keeps getting higher and higher because they,
I've been there. I
yeah,
feel that so real.
yeah, yeah.
Ugh. So anyway, I appreciate the chance to talk and I hope I did okay.
I think you did amazing. You're welcome back anytime. We could talk about probably all kinds of stuff.
I feel confident in that. I don't feel like you and I ever run out of things to discuss. And since we have
No.
this special relationship of being sisters, there's so much
Mm-hmm.
fun stuff to read.
Well, fun for us at least. I don't
Yeah.
know if it's for everyone else. Everett said, Gina, you did great.
Aw,
And
thanks,
that's
Everett.
really nice because Everett is one of my problem children. Are we going to call you that, Everett? But Everett's very sassy. So for that display of like genuine niceness was really heartwarming.
I appreciate that, Everett.
I
Thank
love
you.
that.
And I appreciate everyone listening to me ramble. I'm a good rambler. Passed it on to my
Yeah,
children.
it's genetic.
It's totally
Yeah, they were
genetic.
also making jokes. They're like, oh, Nick's sister came on and they talked a lot. That's, like how unexpected. Because I'm known to
Surprise!
talk, which is so funny because I don't know if people understand in my regular life, I'm so quiet. And it's like something people say to me all the time that they're just like, you're so quiet. But then I get on air and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, everyone's saying thank you. Everett said, you mean sweet angels? Yes, Everett, you're one of my sweet, sweet angels. Yeah, so just thank you, sis, for coming on. I want to let you go so you don't, you know, someone doesn't break your window to rescue you from being locked in your car for 2 hours.
Oh, no, you know what? I will say I'm really happy that you didn't even notice. My windows have been open the whole time.
Yeah, it worked out
So,
good. I'm glad. Because I was very worried about you having to have them rolled up. We all know. A lot of us are vegans here. We know from PETA how dangerous, living being in a rolled up window car is. Yeah, so anyway, well, thanks, sis. I'm going to end this stream and we can say goodbye in private behind the scenes. But I want to publicly thank you for being here and talking about your experience. And I think you just brought up so many really important things for us to think about. But also, I just, really appreciate you sharing your story just as understanding someone's lived experience.
thank you. It was a
So
lot of
thank
fun.
you. Yeah. All right, kids. We're going to sign off now. Thank you for tuning in. And I will be back in 2 weeks with another sex stream where Maureen and her colleague Mike are going to come on to answer questions about sex that they've gotten from high school students that they teach. So these are real questions that kids have asked about sex, and we're going to go through them all and give our answers. I'm really excited about it. So we will see y'all then. Bye.